Well, and everybody, welcome, welcome, welcome. You are here live at the Comedians on Technology, People and Drugs podcast. And I'm your co host, Sam. Joe is our other amazing co host, Joe. Woo! And we are very blessed today to have a fantastic guest, Jonnie Shemoon. Jonnie Shemoon, welcome to the show. So great to have you here.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, good stuff. Just tell us a little something about what's the main things you're doing as a comedian at the moment. You know, where are you popping up, and what's your angle?
Oh, I'm popping up. You know what I'm popping up like? You know that game, Guess Who? And you know at the end when you've finished, and then you fling them up, and they all pop up really quickly, and then they're there. I'm popping up like that. That's how I'm popping up.
Fantastic.
Where I'm popping up? Oh, so I was just saying before, I run this night Covent Garden Comedy Cellar, which we're building up. It's in a nice it's in the cellar of an Italian restaurant, just off of Drury Lane, just next to it, down Endell Street. And we run that at the moment Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, but also we're looking to hit up Tuesday as well. And it's growing, it's getting better. So I'm emceeing there on Friday, Saturday, sometimes Wednesday. But it's a great night and it's a great opportunity. I love giving the opportunity to other comics as well to come perform and do their shtick there to a nice, friendly, warm audience, well fed as well with their pizza and lasagna and what have you.
How long have you been in the game, man?
Huh?
How long have you been in the game?
Since October last year. I'm very fortunate to have this gig that I'm talking about because, you know, I just happened, it's a right place, right time kind of story, you know, right place, right time. And then do you fancy it? Go on then. And then you sort of take it from there. So since October, I've been dilly-dallying in comedy. I'm loving it, to be honest, loving it.
So you literally went from having starting comedy in October, sorry, to having your own thing really, really quickly, right?
Yeah, it's ridiculous, isn't it, Joe? It's ludicrous. Yeah. I think what's really helped though is I'm a teacher. And therefore, you know, day in, day out, you're going in front of a class for 6 hours, a load of different classes, different students, different people. And you're trying to, you know, build engagement and interest and captivate an audience. There's a crowd work, there's a lot of similarities, there's a lot of transferable skills between the two. And I think that's really facilitated. I mean, there's a lot of comics, aren't there, who were teachers, like Greg Davies and Ramesh and, you know, and others. They're the big two.
Yeah. I've done a bit of teaching. I did a bit of teaching for a bit during the lockdown, between lockdown 2 and 3. I did a bit of what do you call it? Sort of supply. You know, what do you call the guy that sorts the supply out?
The cover supervisor.
Yeah, I did a bit of that cover supervisor gig. You know, just to get out of the house. Amazing place down as a school, a mainstream dyslexic school, not down near me. And like you say, there's very little terror like standing in front of a class of, you know, children for the first time. And and it's not just like, you know, you got to sit in silence, you got to get them interacting, they got to learn something. Like they got to be getting something out of it.
This is it. I literally have a joke, a little joke where I was working for a period in a school for students with autism. I have a joke where I say, if you're thinking of heckling me, just know that I worked in an autistic school and therefore it was literally my day job to be heckled all day. So it's almost a futile gesture if you want to, by all means, but you'll get something right back. And there's a truism in that idea. Then, like I say, in the autistic school, but not just in autistic school, in all of the schools, you always get, you know, students who will just chuck something, a curveball at you midway through, and you have to respond to it. You can't just let it. And that philosophy transitions into comedy. In that, I think when something happens in the room, which is just, I think, importantly, it distracts the audience. So the audience are aware something has happened. You can't really ignore it. Some things, if the audience don't know it's happened, fine, you can go by it. But if the audience know and it's distracted, there's no point. If you carry on with your joke, it's not going to get the same effect. You need to sort of adapt and sort of improvise to what's going on in the room. I think it's an important part of comedy.
So have you had any proper good heckles?
Proper good heckles. Normally, I like my form is to heckle the audience before they heckle me. So I'm jumping right down their throats. So have I had any good ones? I asked a question. I like to ask a bit abstract questions. I asked this guy, if you had a chair, what would you do? What would you invent out of that chair if you could invent anything? Right. Weird question, abstract question. And the guy immediately came back as if he had thought about this question all his life. He said, I would attach 70 well-inflated balloons to this chair and then float across the sky on it. And I thought, how you just had that. You didn't hesitate. No, not a second hesitation. And he just had that. It was a remarkable comeback.
Yeah.
Comedy's in the room. It's just you're decanting it.
Have you read you know who Martin Amis is, and obviously you know that kind of group of people that they used to hang about. It was like Salman Rushdie, Martin Amis, the guy who wrote Atonement, Ian McEwan, I think Christopher Hitchens, people like that. Do you know that sort of? They were sort of the kind of, you know, supposedly, you know, the bad boys of 80s literature. But apparently the sharpest one was Salman Rushdie. That's what I'd heard. Yeah, he was just like not miss a beat, the sharpest of all of them.
Yeah. So what? I mean, they were writers. Where did they go on?
No, well, you know who Martin Amis is?
Yeah, I've heard of the names, but I'm not familiar with like work and stuff.
Yeah, I suppose. Well, maybe it's a sort of a. I'm showing my age a bit because it was big in the sort of. You know, it was a bit. You know, he's more of a kind of an 80s, 90s sort of guy. He's still writing a bit. But they used to all kind of hang out together and just come up with word games and stuff. And they would, you know, it was perceived to be a little bit sort of juvenile and trivial. But the way that Christopher Hitchens described it was like training. It was like training your brain. That you just got to come up with stuff. You know, like to keep the sharpness. You know, so they would do things like you had to change the words of a play, of a film or a book or anything like that, and you had to change the word love for dick and stuff like that. You know what I mean? So you get things like a heart for dick. So it'd be like dick of darkness. Do you know what I mean? So, shit like that. I mean, it was it was puerile.
This was the creme de la creme of the time, of the creativity of the time of the 80s and 90s. Change love for dick. Let's go. That's our exercise.
I guess they were forming what's currently called the hive mind or the masterminds of the time, which I think leads me into maybe a first question for you, Jonnie, from our regular listeners will know. There are certain questions we always ask. I think that process of generation and creativity, it's often difficult when you're on your own. What Joe's describing there is the process of getting together and sort of teaming up. I guess for you, both in comedy and in life, which relationships are the most important for you to help you be creative, or even just to survive?
Oh, it's important. You know what? Something that I was gigging a lot, like every day across January, and by the end of it, it kind of gets to you because in a sense you have to constantly be analytical and evaluative, and that means that you're thinking about what has happened and what might happen in the future. And what that stops you being is present in the moment. Now I sort of had to bring myself back to being present in the moment, and it was really important for me to spend time with my family, especially my nieces and my nephew. And the lovely thing, and they're like really young, like they're 1, 5, 7, and 9. They're really young. And the lovely thing about hanging out with your niece and nephew, like that kind of age, is they have no, like, they're not going to ask me, oh, how's the comedy going? Like, oh, how's this, how's that? It's just what it is, and this is so important for comedy, is just play. It's just playfulness. It is just throwing ideas. In fact, Joe, what you were just saying about like that collection of people, the creative minds of that time, and just changing like the language and like having those wordplay games, that is play. That is simple primary school play. But there's so much to be taken out of those kind of exercises because they broaden the mind, and they force you to be present in the moment. So in terms of relationships, it came back to me. I need to spend time with my family, like the kids especially. they just make you present. They make you present, and you need to be that. I think to have like just happiness and peace as well, to feel sort of peaceful in a moment. It's important not to be thinking always, or like this for the future, this for that of the past. You know. I think also, I think then just the one last little bit is also diversity of your experience. I think hanging around with just not necessarily but just diverse range of people with different ages, different ethnicities, different backgrounds, you know, classes, like all of that is all really good, because then you're just getting all sorts of input for you to chew up, you know, later on when you're thinking about the interaction. So yeah, that's been really important.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I think as we'll, you know, probably come on to chat about in the bit where we chat about, you know, the kind of psychedelics piece. That's the point for me with comedy, is that it's that spontaneity, it's that stuff happening in real time that you can't fake. There's no escape. It's like it's just like, you know, raw, and in the moment this is right there. And I guess that's the same with kids. I mean, I guess over time we get that beaten out of us, you know, with like
100%. That's it. You say the word spontaneity. That has been like the key word stuck in me for such a long time. When I started, it was like, I think my 4th or 5th gig, and I had learnt a script, and I went on, and it was boring. I didn't like it at all. It didn't feel right. It felt horrible. And after that, I said to myself, listen, that is not you. That does not fit. And I said, just be in the moment when you go on. And the reaction was so much more, just so much better. People were part of it. You know, you planted yourself in the room. It felt like this could only happen tonight. This could only happen now. And that makes for so much more a special kind of moment. You know, then suddenly you're present and you're reacting to things in the room, and it feels like, you know, unrehearsed. It feels natural. And that's been a really important part of my comedy, and the emceeing as well. I think has been really valuable for that spontaneity.
It's really interesting what you're saying there about, you know, wanting to connect with the children, the spontaneity, all those things. Absolutely fantastic. That I was interested there though, that you said you were gigging almost every night in January, but you were saying like that it was kind of, I guess, maybe not the gigs themselves, because presumably when you're on stage during the gig, you're, as you've just been describing, you love being in the moment, and that's when it's more fun and spontaneous and so on. But I guess, is it like preparing for the gigs, getting to the gigs, is like, presumably that was the thing that was forcing you to think about being in a different place. And is that right? Have I understood correctly?
Yeah, absolutely. Before the gig, you know, you've got loads of thoughts whirring around your head. Of course you do, you know, like even like little things, like especially when you're new, you're thinking, well, how am I getting to the gig? Like even these little kind of simple things. But then attached to that, when you might be on the tube on the way, then you'll like, I bring my notepad and I'm jotting down like, all right, maybe I'll say this, maybe I'll say that. Like, what do I know about the gig? What do I know about the room? Maybe you know nothing, you know, and all of these things constantly sort of going around. Now I try and take a really sort of more relaxed approach. I have my headphones in, and I'll go in, and I think this just comes with time, doesn't it? Just more comfortable.
Definitely.
More comfortable with what how you're going to be, who you're going to be on stage as well.
Yeah. I mean, Joe, that leads into, you've got some questions on comedy that you often like to ask, or you want to jump off onto the psychedelics.
No, I'm just interested about what kind of got you over the line, as it were. Like, how long was it between, say, thinking about it, or I fancy that, or to actually doing it? How long did that take?
To be honest, it's about 2 weeks.
Right.
I do that. I very much I jump into things if it comes to me. Like a fair few years ago, I thought, you know what, I'm not really happy with what I'm doing. I was working for a company called like At Your Service, which was like staffing for like parties where the staff were at the party or something. It did actually, through that, I did meet the Queen, but that's another story for another time. But in that moment, I was like, I'm not very happy, and I just booked for 2 weeks in the future to fly to Brazil, and then I ended up doing, I think, 8 months and a day around the whole of like South America, and it was just so, it's in me to just go, you know what, this isn't right, or I want to do this. This is the next step, and then just sort of crack on with it. And I'd spent the past 3 years teaching in Margate, which is great. I loved it, you know, and I learned a trade. And like I said, there's loads of transferable skills. And I've always loved making people laugh. I've always loved being in that kind of, like that environment, you know, where there's like back and forth, where you're meeting like sort of other creative people who are like, you know, trying to build a repertoire and like trying to like, they have like this like ambition and motivation that, you know, so I loved like everything about the idea. So I thought, well, you know, what's the worst that can happen is very much my like sort of approach. And I popped myself on and I was like, oh, okay, I see what this is, you know.
And are we talking about psychedelics or comedy at the moment? I'm not sure.
Maybe both.
Well, South America, there's a sort of segue into it, because I mean that
of course.
talking about answering calls, the first kind of call of that nature, if you like, that was just too strong to ignore was to go to Peru. Don't know if you went to Peru on your travels.
No, I did. I loved Peru.
Yeah, it was great. So yes, I went to a place in the Amazon near Iquitos, called the Temple of the Way of Light. So, you know, massive shout out to the Temple of the Way of Light as a place. If anyone's interested in you know, experiencing ayahuasca in the Amazon, in a place where you get brilliantly looked after, highly professional, brilliant sort of screening process, brilliant sort of introduction, brilliant healers, all healers from the Shipibo lineage, you know, great attention to detail on the medicine, and you know, and good aftercare as well. So anyway, that's where I ended up, and did 2 weeks in the Amazon at the Temple of the Way of Light.
What was your experience of ayahuasca? What was your experience of it?
So from a sort of, it's quite an interesting one, because it's what they say, and it kind of, the more you do it, the more you realize it's true, is that you don't get what you want out of an ayahuasca experience, you get what you need. So, you know, you might get people who go into it thinking, right, it's going to be, because there is a psychedelic component to it, like there is potentially you know, intergalactic travel, meeting aliens, meeting, you know, the source of everything, you know, I mean, that can all happen, but it's also a kind of deeply sort of physical and almost quite sort of, I don't know, it's not a trip, it's a kind of an experience of healing, do you know what I mean, at a very deep level. So what happens is, to me, was that I had the sense over the 5 ceremonies that I did over that period of time, that I had the sense of being taken back to the sort of formation of my personality and character, if you like, and almost having it kind of, you know, anything that was like shaky in those foundations, almost having it rebuilt and put back together again and understood and it was so clearly understandable what was happening in the experience, that what happens is you sit in the dark, and a healer, a shaman, you might call them, healer, you know, curandera in Peru, they'll sit opposite you and they'll sing to you in the dark. So essentially a hymn, it's a vibration, a hymn that they know that they'll sing to you. So they'll sing it to you face to face. You're sitting kind of very close to them. They'll sing to you, and you know exactly what they're singing to you and why they're singing it to you. It's very, very odd. So first ceremony was almost being taken back to almost being a kind of like, you know, baby, if you like, you know, maybe even pre-baby, and that kind of feeling of being like, you know, held in a kind of the warm embrace of maybe your mother or whatever, or something like that, somewhere where you feel completely safe and sorted out. And then it kind of gradually kind of built over the week or 2 weeks, where it was like each ceremony kind of built on itself. So by the end of it, it was like, right, you've kind of, all that stuff that was kind of percolating around in your system, which needed to be addressed, needed to be rebuilt, looked at, is done. And you're like, shit, it is, isn't it? You know what I mean? It's like, it's that sort of feeling, but it's not, it's a feeling of actually knowing that it's happened. You know, park all the stuff about the kind of the, you know, the DMT type experiences and all that, but that feeling of like, shit, that was like, I didn't, you know, before I came here, I didn't know that. And after this experience, I know that. You know what I mean? It's just that it's a feeling of knowing, as opposed to understanding, if that makes sense. And the range of experiences and things that I saw there with different people's experiences. I mean, obviously, what happens in ceremony stays in ceremony, but the range of different experiences that people had was the most remarkable thing, because you've got people going there for all manner of different reasons. Some deep, some not so deep, some very serious, some not so serious. But everybody that was there, bar maybe one or two people, like say 20 people, got exactly what was required for them at that particular point in time, and all in a hugely different way. So it's a pretty
it's interesting you say like those numbers there where you said one or two people, but other than that everyone did, because there's a really famous study, isn't there, with the use of psilocybin, where they gave it to people who had suffered with 20 people, I think it was, who had suffered with like severe depression for 20 years or longer, who had gone through all types of therapy and had no lasting effect. And they gave psilocybin, and they found that I think it was about 14 of them no longer had suffered with a depression for, I think it was 6 months or longer. I think it was about three or four, 2 months, and then depression sort of came back, and then it didn't work on one or two. And that was mainly because the chemical, I think, was rejected by the body. It was something sort of chemical. It wasn't because the process didn't work. It was just the process didn't happen. So it's interesting. The numbers seem to reflect similarly to that stuff.
Yeah. Well, I'll just leap in case any of our listeners are thinking of taking larger amounts of psychedelics in the near future. This is, of course, can have a very, very serious effect on you. We would recommend consulting with a medical professional, and or considering that this is something that, as Joe received in Peru, you're guided by people who have a lot of experience with these things. So I think we just want to add to any of our listeners, this is not something to experiment with willy-nilly, but as Joe, I think maybe you were mentioning before in the pre-show, it's moving towards being something that's available through the NHS.
No, I mean, the whole point is it has to be introduced in a safe and responsible way, because these are very, very powerful experiences that are not to just be sort of trifled with. And what I was about to say was that probably the success of these studies is because the screening processes are so thorough. So you won't get people doing it who've got maybe a history of kind of like psychosis or schizophrenia or whatever. So there's certain contraindications from other like for taking other antidepressants and things like that. So the template way will list all these different things out which are contraindicated. So in different kind of mental states that you don't want to be doing it. If you suffer from any of them. And also there's there's an intensive questionnaire. There's often interviews. I think that study you might be talking about was down at Imperial. I don't know if it was the one Imperial College.
You're right. Yeah.
Treatment resistant depression. So again, a big plug to Imperial, and the guy who set the study up. I think he set it up. There's a guy called Robin Carhart Harris. Look him up. Anyone who wants to find out a bit more about that and about the research that's happening. So Imperial have done amazing work with treatment, like you say, treatment resistant depression. To qualify for the study, as I understand it, you had to have treatment-resistant depression. It wasn't just like I feel a bit low. It was like it was really serious, and so and guided and supported. And that's the point. Is like you can't be given this kind of stuff to people who are not not capable, but not maybe mentally set up to be able to understand what's happening, and you can get in over your head, for sure. There are different kind of ways to approach psilocybin. There's kind of the microdose and then there's a macrodose. You've got people out there doing tiny amounts that are and reporting massive benefits to their cognitive function. They feel more creative, they feel more excited, so probably great for comedians, right? If you want to feel like you're firing properly, and again, not advocating to do anything illegal, but it is happening. But there's also people who are, at the kind of macro dose level who are kind of doing the intergalactic space travel. But that's not what I'm particularly here to advocate for. I'm here to advocate for the rescheduling of something like psilocybin, because at the minute it's scheduled in such a way that it's really difficult to do research on it. So there was a question in the House of Commons a month or 2 months ago, because it's kind of sitting there almost ready to be rescheduled. And there was a question asked by Crispin Blunt MP in Prime Minister's questions to Boris Johnson on precisely that. Is like, when are we going to take advantage of these huge research possibilities and get up to speed with what the rest of the world's doing? And Boris Johnson went, yeah.
Of course he did. Of course he did.
Yeah.
I guess amidst the current sort of, zeitgeist of the time, I guess it seems like, well, we've got enough on our plate kind of thing. However, I think it's absolutely right that I think it is becoming an area more researched, more appreciated, not just psilocybin, but other sort of chemicals being utilized for like therapeutic properties. It is inching, but I think you're right in the sentiment of like getting like what the direction the world is going in. And this is a Western idea of us not utilizing the substances that exist in the world. In other parts outside of the West, they have been utilizing. We're speaking a lot about South America, but not just South America, all different parts of the world. They've been utilizing this for the millennia.
Well, and I'll maybe jump off that to pose another question so we can learn some more about you Jonnie, is, as Joe was saying, there are people with the macrodosing and sort of encountering intergalactic aliens and special forces and so on, which sort of connects with some of the bigger questions of spirituality. And, is there something beyond? Is that something that plays any role in your life? Jonnie, does that affect you, or is it, are you a hardened atheist, or I don't know? Where do you fit on that spectrum? What do you believe about the big wide
Interesting.
beyond?
I think that there's a lot of, so I'm Jewish. I've grown up in a Jewish household. My dad is a extremely Orthodox Jew, which I should get a lot more comedy out of that, to be honest. And I will. I'll be mining that sometime soon. But I've grown up with the idea of religion, and I think I have to be very careful, because I think my dad he's not a good reflection of Judaism. So it could push me sort of away. So I have to be very sort of compos mentis about the fact that, it could reflect badly on the religion generally. But I don't allow it to. And I think what I was going to say is that there's a lot of labels with religion and kind of fixing you into a certain position. When I think, you can find your own, it needs to be bespoke. It needs to be your own personal feeling towards the world. So what I believe in, it complements science. I mean, I'm a science teacher, so it kind of like, there's like a combat there. But I think religion and science, we appreciate more and more that they can collaborate together. And my principle is that, we all started from the same place, whether you believe that was God, or whether you believe it was the Big Bang, whether it's science or religion you go by, it all started from one thing, from something, And then, so what that means is, and this is like rule number one of thermodynamics, the law of, the conservation of mass and conservation of energy principle, that it can't be created or destroyed. It can only be transferred, which means all the energy that has ever been has already ever existed and will ever exist in the end. So it's all part and one of the same thing, which necessitates an interconnectedness between everything and everyone. We've all derived from the same energy source. So to me, and I've felt that I've certain things happen which are very difficult to explain, and we can put down to coincidence. I don't believe in coincidence, and I don't believe in luck. I think there's a reason behind everything, and I think some things are beyond explanation. There's humans were just not capable of comprehending the intricacy of how things have come about. And I think our past and our ancestries and our heritage is so important to who we are and the role they play in our lives, far more than we can appreciate. So I think this interconnectedness has always been a principle of mine that I've lived with, and it makes me very comfortable, I think, with people, because I almost feel like we're all part and one of the same thing. I try not to use distinct, like, they're part of this culture or they're part of this race, and I try not to use that. I just think of everything as one and all the same thing. And recently, what's been establishing itself in my mind is the idea that we are all God. That God is something that is within us. I don't picture something which is, because my dad talks to me about heaven and hell. He has a very clear image of what heaven and hell is. And this one individual, whatever, God that he has a connection with, and when he prays, they're in conversation. And this kind of like anthropomorphism of God and like clear imagery of heaven and hell. But it just seems too, you know, I don't know. Listen, you can never say no, so maybe he's right. There's no evidence to suggest that that's not the case. But for me personally, I feel like that God is something which is derived from our greatest, deepest sense of like who we are, like what Jung would have said, the self, who we are, and I think God is the harmony within us. It's the self-actualization within us, and when we self-actualize, we realize our potential to be this God who we are, and that's in all of us. That's my recognition of you know of religion, if you can bracket it under that.
Yeah, there's an increasing literature. I'm not going to say I've read it, but you know, you've got the Terrence McKenna stoned ape theory about, you know, how we came to be the kind of the creatures that we are, which was actually through the kind of ingestion of psilocybin, and because there was an expansion on the size of the human brain, which no one can really account for, because we had a kind of small brain, big brain, and it's like, how did that happen? And the Terrence McKenna stoned ape theory is that, you know, the previous iteration of the humanoid, whatever, you know, creature was just all of a sudden running around in wherever they were running around, and just started munching on very high doses of mushrooms because they were there. And then that is what stimulated the kind of brain growth. But there's I mean, that's a theory. I mean, it's nice to kick it around, think about it as a theory. But there's the other one where the kind of origin of any religious practice is in the ingestion of, you know, psychedelics. You know, Jesus was a mushroom is a thing you hear around the place, and you know, a lot of the kind of different kind of, if you go back into kind of antiquity, archaeology, and the things that people dig up, these kind of like statues of kind of mushroom deities and so on, like that predate kind of almost, you know, I mean, the clever carbon dating stuff that puts this stuff way before some of the stories that we hear. Do you know what I mean? And some of the earliest cave drawings are of kind of, you know, look like there's some sort of mushroom cult. Really interesting stuff. But I guess that's kind of, it's nice to kind of speculate on it. But I think there's, you know, as I say, from my side, it's the practical things, particularly with things like, you know, the increasing amounts of depression, anxiety, you know, that's kicking around, you know, the traumatic brain injury stuff, the veteran stuff. I think there's actually, you know, just a practical need to kind of look at it in a bit more of a mature way. That's just, again, back to the kind of advocacy piece.
I think we can definitely say, Joe, that you have psychedelics on the brain. If no one else does. Yeah. I mean, I think the theory about the stoned ape is very interesting. I mean, all of the many theories about how our brains got as big as they did. I think there's a big one about how we started moving to the coast and eating shellfish. Lots and lots of different alternatives. But I think there's no doubt that so many of the, you know, shall we say, psychedelic experience over the years have led to religions. I mean, I think people who've been in strange mental states independent. I mean, some people say, "Are you on something?" And I'm just like naturally strange. And there, I think sometimes the natural strangeness that comes out of us is the kind of thing that can end up starting religions if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, or the right place at the right time.
Place at the right time. Yeah.
So to lead back to what Jonnie was saying there on the, you know, we're all one. A lot of the sort of, you know, meditation, mindfulness, Buddhist things that I read very much connect with what you were saying about God being in everything, and this kind of fundamental misapprehension between God being out there and actually God being the kind of fabric of existence. So yeah, really relate to what you were saying there, Jonnie.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think of it in like, and I know how it sounds. It kind of sounds, a lot of people would listen and say, oh, that's very like hippie kind of culture. Here kind of, but to me as a scientist, it makes logical sense. It completely kind of corroborates with the laws of thermodynamics. Like it corroborates with physics and biology and chemistry. It all like links in really beautifully.
Absolutely.
And it seems to be logical. And I think Joe, you were kind of saying as well, like just mildly of like, you know, you can speculate about everything and come to whatever conclusions you do. But I think it's important to appreciate that it is speculation. You know, we can't know life after death. We can have ideas. Some people have been there apparently, but is it conclusive evidence? No, exactly. So, you know, I think what's really important is to tolerate any concept and idea that you come across and be considerate of it and not be closed off. To keep an open mind, as in, well, that could be the case. I'm not saying it's not. It just doesn't need to be what I believe in, you know.
Yeah, I kind of struggle. I mean, I'd kind of dip in and out of philosophy. You know, I'd pick up I'd see a reference to a philosopher. I think, oh, I'll have a go at that, and you'd pick it up, and there's so many backward references and other references. I was just getting lost, you know. And so I thought, right, what I'll do is I'll start from the beginning. So I got one of those big thick ones, which is like, you know, from the Greeks, Western. This is Western philosophy, right? I'm going to start with the Greeks, and I'm going to go to the, you know, to the present day, right? So I read that kind of. So I got the kind of the chronology of it, the chronological order of it all, and stuff like that. But I just kept thinking that it was like, you know, one person would prove one thing, another person would prove another thing. It always just seemed to be this kind of continuous either or, right? You know, who's right, who's not. And that seemed to me to be just the theme that ran through the whole thing. And at the end of it, the guy who was writing the commentary said, you know, be careful when you think something has been proven beyond all, you know, reasonable doubt, because this guy proved this guy proved it this way. This guy came and just said that was bollocks, and this guy came and said it was bollocks, and this guy came and said it was bollocks. And I remember in being out in Peru, and one of the experiences I had was that, you know, that kind of, when you're in that game of like, it's this or it's that kind of like, you know, kind of right or wrong, yes or no. And I remember being just taken out of that, and I really honestly felt my brain kind of moving a little bit. It was really strange, like my brain just started going like shaking a bit, and I felt like I was just being pulled out of that perspective. And then I was looking at it, and I was looking at the binary perspective from outside of it, and it didn't mean anything, and it meant nothing. And I was like, whoa! And I was like, I'm writing that one down. That was amazing. And that, you know, and that wasn't any intergalactic travel. That was just, that's how I felt it was happening. It was like, so kind of coming out of that kind of temporal realm, out of that binary realm, out of that duality stuff. I mean, I'm amateur at kind of, you know, theology, but, you know, certain practices, certainly as I understand Zen anyway, Zen is designed to take you out of that duality. And if you try and explain that duality in Zen, you're done.
This is so important, Joe. This is a huge revelation, because what the brain is, it's important to consider the brain as something which is more of a funneling out device than actually bringing in. We take in ridiculous amounts, you know, of what we sense through the day, of what we perceive through the day. The brain is far more of a tool to get rid of such stuff than to actually take it in. And what the brain will try and do is it will take the reductionist approach because it's easier. It will say, is it this or is it that? You know, is it black? Is it white? It's just, it will try and do that and simplify things because it's easier for it to be simple. But when you have that revelation that you've had there, Joe, which is so like valuable, you realize everything is across a spectrum. Why are we trying to reduce things to such simple kind of, ideas of like binary? And, you know, I think we've fallen for it a little bit in society, in our politics, where we've fallen into a trap of a simplistic, like, it can only be this or that, yes or no. Like, we've seen it, and it's been very derisive between like, oh, anti-vax and vaccines, you know, or you know, a euro out the euro, you know. We've seen it a lot, and it's been incredibly derisive when it should never be like that. It should be, what's the best bits of this? What's the best bits of that? What's the best bits of this? Where on the spectrum is the most benefit for the most amount of people that we can have? And it's more complex, and it makes life recondite, and it makes it harder. It makes life far more challenging to live through. But it makes it more textured as well, and it makes it more tasteful. It makes it better for everyone when you consider, just like you're saying, Joe, when you consider a whole rainbow of like of opportunity, you know, what can happen and what can be.
You'll hear a lot in sort of psychedelic circles. I'm dominating, you know, keep talking about it, but there's
psychedelics on the brain. But go on, go make your point.
People are talking about, you know, and I don't think it's just about the plants, but I think it's about, you know, like you're saying, a way of looking at the world which is not just that kind of very formulaic approach to things. That there is a kind of way of looking at the world, and I think that's where comedy has such a huge part to play in this kind of next phase. And I think, you know, laughter and spontaneity and plant medicine and expansion and higher vibrational kind of energies is definitely going to be, you know, something that's going to play a much larger part, if my feeling is right, because
they've started incorporating like laughter sessions in universities now, haven't they? And in schools as well. There was something about, I was reading in the paper, there's classes now, an hour of laughter, a lesson on laughter, you know. So they're really appreciating the value of just like that, because there's a big physiological response to when we smile, when we laugh. It generates the hormones, you know, dopamine, serotonin, which like facilitate our reward pathways and make us happy. There's, you know, and like you highlighted earlier, Joe, like cases of like mental health issues, anxiety, especially in younger generation, have been shooting up. And being a teacher, I see it on ground level. It's clear as day that this is the case, you know. Depression, anxiety being the main sort of two that you see. And it's like, it's a shame, and there's a lot of reasons that you can say, but it's good that we're identifying it as an issue as a society, and at least we're starting. A lot more needs to be done, but at least we're starting to change things, you know, to think more broadly across the spectrum. Like, well, what makes us happy? Well, laughter. Let's look more into laughter, you know. Again, they've been doing this outside Western culture for way longer, you know, and we're just starting to incorporate, you know, mindful, like you're saying, mindfulness practice, being present, you know. This has all been done outside of Western culture for so much longer, and now we're starting ourselves to incorporate it. And I guess you say better late than never, really. Speaking of late, it's 25 to 8. I can stay a little. Is there another question maybe? I was supposed to go at 7:30, but I'd stay a little longer.
Yeah, well, so, I mean, we've got, I think we've covered various different bits and pieces there.
Oh, we have.
Yes. You know, there are like several other questions that could be asked, but maybe we should have you back on the show on a later date to ask you those questions.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it.
I'd like to maybe come down once I've done my next course, and I'm feeling up to it. Come and get started. Did you say you did the Jeff Innocent course, or you've
literally, we had the penultimate session today. Literally, I've just come back from it, and next week is our show at the Up the Creek, and then that's that.
And that's next Sunday.
That's next Sunday. Yeah. Hey, listen, anyone listening, and Joe, Sam, you're more than welcome to come on down to the show. It starts, I think, 2:30.
Fantastic.
Fancy it?
Yeah. Well, maybe that's the note to end on. I mean, Jonnie. So that's people can catch you. This coming Sunday. I guess it's Sunday today. So
that's it. Next week, a week today, 2:30.
Up the creek, which is down. I believe it's the Cutty Sark is the nearest, just around the corner from that station.
Greenwich.
I was there on Thursday. But yeah, anything else to flag about if people are interested to see you? They want to. Follow you on Instagram, on Twitter. What's the place that people want? If they want more Jonnie Shemoon, where should they be going?
If you want more of what this has been, Instagram is your best place. Jonnie Shemoon, Jonnie. I don't know. Can they see this?
Shemoon. They can't see this, but if you spell it for them, we'll put it in the show notes. So spell it again.
Shemoon is she like a woman. Moon is in opposed to the sun. Put that in, you'll get me.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Jonnie.
Great to meet you, man.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Lovely to meet you, Joe. Sam, thank you for having me. Pleasure.
Absolute pleasure. So yes, that was Comedians on that variety, that triple by Jonnie. And of course, you know, if you want to support the show, go to patreon.com, Comedians on. You can get in at 3 levels of donations. There is the £5 per month early access to episodes, the £10 per month early access to episodes and bonus episodes, and the £20 per month monthly AMAs, early access to episodes and bonus episodes. We'll hope to see you again soon. Bye for now.